The movie begins inside the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston with Professor Lambeau, who happens to be a Fields Medal winner in mathematics. The professor challenges his students by posting an extremely difficult math problem and announces that whoever manages to solve it before the end of the semester will have their name placed on the institute's list of geniuses and will also receive a prize. Lambeau leaves the equation written on the blackboard. Later, we see Will, the janitor at the institute, cleaning the floors. Will is secretly a genius not only in mathematics, but also in organic chemistry. And on top of that, he's extremely well-read despite not having completed his education. When Will notices the math problem, it sparks his curiosity, so he copies it down to take home. After work, he meets up with his friend Chucky, and they head to a bar for a few drinks. Though Will eventually leaves early and heads home, leaving Chucky behind. At home, Will starts working on the problem, scribbling equations on his bathroom mirror. The next day, while at work in the institute, Will manages to solve the math problem on the blackboard. Afterward, he goes out with Chucky to play some baseball and joke around. Meanwhile, at a university party attended by Professor Lambeau, some of his students approach him and inform him that someone has already solved the problem on the blackboard. Surprised, Lambeau heads back to the institute with them and finds the problem solved perfectly and with great precision. He asks the students who solved it, but they all insist they have no idea. At that same time, Will and Chucky finish their game at the club, hop into Chucky's car, and meet up with their other friends, Morgan and Billy. While driving, Will spots a guy named Carmine who used to beat him up when they were kids. Carmine and his buddies are harassing some girls on the street, so Chucky pulls the car over, and Will jumps out, grabs Carmine by the collar, and starts beating him. Naturally, Chucky, Morgan, and Billy join in and start brawling with Carmine's friends. The police soon arrive, but Will loses control and keeps pummeling Carmine even with the cops standing right there until they finally step in, restrain him, and drag him off to the police station. We return to Professor Lambeau as he walks into his lecture hall and is stunned to find it packed with people eager to see who the genius was that managed to solve the math problem he had posted. Lambeau begins questioning the students one by one, asking who did it so he could honor them and award the promised prize. But to his surprise, no one speaks up. Meanwhile, Will gets picked up by Chucky in his car after being released from the police station, and Will tells him that a court hearing has been set for the following week because of the fight with Carmine. The next day, when Will is back at work in the institute, he notices the blackboard is empty and casually starts writing new mathematical theorems on it. As Lambeau is leaving his lecture, he spots Will working on the board, calls out to him, but Will feels embarrassed, quickly erases his work, and walks away. Later, Will heads out with his friends to a nightclub. Inside, Chucky approaches two girls to strike up a conversation, but a guy named Clark steps in and listens as Chucky tries to impress the girls by claiming he studied with them before. Clark immediately mocks him, pointing out that Chucky never even attended college. Just then, Will notices what's happening and steps in, standing face to face with Clark. Will begins mocking him with sharp remarks, demonstrating his vast knowledge and quoting from the many books he has read. Clark, unable to counter Will's intellect and wit, is humiliated in front of everyone and left speechless. This gives Will the perfect chance to connect with one of the girls, Skylar, who is impressed by his confidence and intelligence. She gives him her phone number and tells him they should go out sometime. Meanwhile, Professor Lambeau heads to the institute's custodial and maintenance office, the department responsible for hiring janitors. He asks about a worker assigned to Building 2, clearly referring to Will, though he doesn't yet know his name. At first, the staff hesitate to give out any information, but Lambeau insists the matter is important. Eventually, they hand him the contact card of Will's parole officer. That's when Lambeau learns that Will had previously been incarcerated and was released on parole, and that his job at the institute came through a prison rehabilitation office that places parolees in employment opportunities. When the week passes, Will's court session for the fight with Carmine begins. The judge starts listing a long record of charges that Will has racked up over the past 2 years, and he also reminds him of his troubled childhood, moving from one foster home to another because he was constantly causing problems. Will insists on defending himself in court without a lawyer, which greatly impresses Professor Lambeau, who is sitting in the gallery observing the hearing. However, the judge sets bail at $1,000 and orders Will to be placed in a juvenile detention center since he is under 21. While there, Will can't stop thinking about Skylar, so he gives her a call from detention and asks if they can meet soon. Not long after, Will is escorted into a private room where Professor Lambeau is waiting for him. Lambeau presents him with the deal of a lifetime. He has spoken with the judge, and the judge agreed to release Will on certain conditions. Lambeau tells him he needs his brilliance at the Institute, since Will is a once-in-a-generation mathematical genius. But there's a catch. Besides working with Lambeau, Will must attend weekly sessions with a psychologist to evaluate his behavior. Lambeau warns him that if he breaks any of these conditions, he will be sent straight back to jail. Will resists at first, but eventually he realizes that freedom, no matter the terms, is better than being locked up, so he accepts the deal. Soon after, Will is released under Lambeau's supervision. Lambeau takes him back to the Institute and begins testing him with complex math problems, quickly confirming that Will is every bit as brilliant as he suspected. Afterward, Lambeau takes Will to meet a psychologist, Dr. Henry. But before the session, Will reads one of Henry's books. During their meeting, Will starts off politely, then suddenly shocks Henry by claiming that he himself is gay, which leaves Henry speechless and ends the session abruptly. Lambeau then tries another psychologist, who uses hypnosis with his patients. The doctor attempts to put Will under and speak to his subconscious mind, but Will plays along, pretending to be hypnotized while actually staying fully awake. Eventually, he reveals the act, mocking the doctor and dismissing the whole idea. Frustrated, Will walks out, declaring that he doesn't need a psychologist at all. At that point, Lambeau decides to reach out to his old college roommate, Dr. Shawn, who is also a psychologist. He visits Shawn at the university where he teaches, and the two sit down together. When Lambeau asks why Shawn skipped their class reunion, Shawn explains that he was busy, though Lambeau notices how much Shawn has changed since the death of his wife, Nancy, whom he had deeply loved. Lambeau starts telling him about Will, the math prodigy, and asks for his help, urging him to hold weekly therapy sessions with the boy because he desperately needs guidance. At first, Shawn resists, saying his schedule is too full, but when Lambeau mentions that Will comes from the same neighborhood where Shawn once lived, Shawn agrees. Soon after, Will meets Shawn for their first session. Shawn asks Lambeau and his assistant Tom to step outside, leaving him alone with Will. Their conversation begins, but Will immediately notices Shawn's shelves full of books and starts mocking his choices, saying he reads the wrong ones. Then, Will's eyes land on an abstract painting Shawn had created, a boat adrift in water with sunset colors in the background. Will analyzes the painting with surprising accuracy, and Shawn admits he isn't far off. But when Will, without knowing anything, casually brings up Shawn's late wife, Shawn warns him to be careful about what he says. Will, however, pushes further, making remarks about her, which provokes Shawn to grab him by the neck and threaten him, telling him that if he ever mentions his wife again, he'll kill him. Will abruptly ends the session and storms out of Shawn's office, leaving Lambeau and Tom outside surprised. Lambeau then goes in to speak with Shawn, expecting him to refuse any further sessions after what just happened. Instead, Shawn shocks him by insisting that Will must come back next Thursday at 4 p.m., emphasizing that he's accepted the challenge of working with this defiant young man and is determined to evaluate him properly. The next day, Will goes out with Skylar, spending time together and getting to know each other more. During their conversation, Will learns that she dreams of attending medical school, and immediately, in his mind, he convinces himself that their relationship is doomed to fail. Then, Thursday arrives, and Will shows up for his second session with Shawn. This time, Shawn takes him out to a public park, where they sit down and talk. Shawn begins by telling Will that maybe he's read plenty of books about war, but he's never actually been on a battlefield, never seen his friends die in his arms. With this example, Shawn tries to make a point that Will shouldn't fool himself into thinking he knows everything, or that he's qualified to pass judgment on people's lives just because he's read about them. Reading is not the same as living. Clearly, Shawn is referring to Will's earlier remarks about his late wife. Shawn opens up about her, speaking with deep emotion, telling Will how she was like an angel to him, how much he loved her, and how cancer stole her away. At that moment, Will feels guilty for mocking her memory without understanding the truth, and he quietly holds his tongue. Afterward, Will goes to work with Chucky at a construction site since he has quit his janitorial job at the Institute. Later, after his shift, he calls Skylar just to hear her voice, but hangs up without saying a word. When it's time for the third session, Will shows up, but sits silently for the entire hour. Shawn does the same, staying silent until the time runs out, and then Will leaves. By the fourth session, Will remains quiet for much of the meeting again, but this time, he eventually opens up, talking about Skylar and admitting how much he loves her, though he doesn't want to ruin her life with his instability. Shawn tries to help him see things differently, explaining that no one is perfect, not even the girl he loves, and that the beauty of love is in how two imperfect people can come together to complete one another. He tells Will that love is what will make him stable and happy, and that through love, he will be able to overcome any challenges alongside his partner. The tension eases, and they even share some laughs as Shawn recalls funny little stories about his late wife. Later, after the session, Will goes to Skylar's dorm, apologizes for neglecting her, and asks her out, but she tells him they'll have to postpone because she's busy studying organic chemistry. And it's pretty clear Skylar doesn't understand much of her organic chemistry work, so Will takes her assignments, sits down somewhere, and solves them all. Then, he brings them back to her, which frees her up to go out with him. They end up going to a dog race together, where Skylar places a bet on a specific dog, and to her delight, that dog actually wins. Later, as they talk more, she's shocked to learn that Will claims to have 12 brothers. Soon after, Will has his fifth session with Shawn, and this time, he flips the roles, acting like the therapist himself. He starts asking Shawn about his late wife, and how they first met. Shawn responds with warmth and excitement, telling the story as if it all happened yesterday, and Will can clearly sense the depth of Shawn's love for her. Meanwhile, Lambeau manages to arrange an incredible job interview for Will at a prestigious company called McNeil. Instead of going himself, Will sends Chucky to the interview, pretending he's Will's business manager. Chucky, of course, bluffs his way through the meeting, acting arrogant with the executives, even as they offer a starting salary of $84,000 a year. Later, Will spends time with Skylar at her place and learns that she'll soon be moving to California to attend university. The news unsettles him. He feels she's slipping away, and he fears that if he goes with her, she'll discover his troubled past and eventually leave him. When Skylar asks about his brothers, Will claims they used to abuse him, but it's clear he's shutting her out, unwilling to open up fully. Skylar, however, insists that she loves him and has no intention of abandoning him, but Will, overwhelmed, grows angry, storms out, and leaves her behind. When he later meets Lambeau, he admits that he blew off the opportunity at McNeil. Lambeau, frustrated, reminds him how hard he worked to secure that position for him, and can't understand why Will keeps sabotaging himself. Not long after, Will receives another job offer, this time from the National Security Agency. They tell him they need his extraordinary mathematical mind to help them crack highly sensitive codes.
Will still refuses, explaining that he might solve some code for them, and that code could point to a location in Africa or another country they're fighting against. Then they'd bomb the place, and he'd end up being responsible for people's deaths. He wants nothing to do with that kind of thing. Later, Will has another session with Shawn. Shawn tells him that he's going to stay stuck where he is unless he changes, and that he's always too afraid to take the next step. Shawn starts giving him a bit of a wake-up call. At that point, Will snaps at him, saying Shawn hasn't done anything with his own life since his wife passed away. Shawn politely but firmly kicks him out of the office, ending the session. When Will leaves Shawn's place, he calls Skylar to ask when she's leaving. She tells him she loves him, but he can't bring himself to say it back. Instead, he just tells her to take care of herself and hangs up. Skylar then heads to the airport and takes her flight to California. Will goes back to construction work with Chucky. During a break, Chucky asks him about Skylar, and Will says she's already left. Chucky then asks when his therapy sessions with Shawn will be over. Will tells him they'll end when he turns 21, and after that, they'll line him up with another job. Chucky gives him the same lecture everyone else does, that he's got a gift nobody else has, and if he doesn't use it, he's going to end up a construction worker for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, Lambeau goes to see Shawn and finds out he threw Will out. Lambeau gets upset, since he personally signed the papers for Will's probation. Shawn snaps at him, saying Will needs more care and attention because he's built this defense mechanism inside himself that pushes people away before they have the chance to leave him. Shawn goes on to say that Will simply doesn't know how to connect with anyone. He's spent nearly 20 years on his own. The argument escalates, their voices rising as they fight over Will. Lambeau just wants to exploit Will's brilliance and talent without even considering whether Will wants that life. Shawn, on the other hand, truly wants to help Will heal and grow into a better man. At that moment, Will is standing outside the office and overhears the entire argument. He walks in, which makes Lambo feel embarrassed, so Lambo leaves, letting Will stay with Shawn. That's when Shawn shows Will his file and tells him that this is what will go to the judge. Shawn starts opening up more to Will, telling him how his own father was an alcoholic who treated him terribly. Will responds by admitting that his father also used to beat and abuse him. At that point, Will breaks down, throws himself into Shawn's arms, and cries. Afterward, Will reflects on everything the people who care about him have said. He goes to McNeil to accept the job Lambo lined up for him. Then comes Will's final session with Shawn. Shawn feels reassured now that Will has chosen the right path for himself. He tells Will that he's taking a break and gives him his phone number at the university, reminding him to call. Before leaving, Shawn gives Will one last piece of advice. Always follow his heart so he can be at peace. They share a heartfelt hug goodbye before Will leaves. On Will's 21st birthday, his friends throw him a little celebration. They all pitch in money and buy him a used car as a gift. Will is thrilled and thanks them with genuine joy. Meanwhile, Lambo visits Shawn to apologize. He finds Shawn packing up to leave. Lambo says he's sorry for yelling, and Shawn replies that he's sorry too, since he also raised his voice. They reconcile, finally putting their differences aside. Later, Will drives his new car to Shawn's house. From outside the window, he sees him, but instead of knocking, he leaves a letter in the mailbox and drives away. When Shawn comes down, he finds the letter. In it, Will thanks him for everything and asks him to tell Lambo not to be upset because he's decided to quit the McNeil job. Will writes that he's on his way to California to be with Skylar, ready to start a new life with her because he loves her, and this time he's following his heart. Shawn is overjoyed, knowing he helped Will transform from a lost young man into someone ready to live fully. Meanwhile, Chucky and the guys swing by Will's place to pick him up, but when Chucky knocks on the door, no one answers. He realizes Will's gone to Skylar, and though he knows he'll miss his best friend, Chucky can't help but feel happy for him. And that's how the movie ends. Honestly, this film, Good Will Hunting, is a masterpiece. It's not just about raw intelligence, but about vulnerability, healing, and the courage to love. The way it mixes humor, pain, and hope makes it unforgettable.